From a mobility point of view, one of the good examples of that is how we have evolved our processes around virtual work options, as we call it, right? Which is, instead of moving in a traditional mobility, you move the talent from country A to country B. In virtual work options, we don't move the talent because the talent doesn't want to move. And rather, we enable the work to move from country A to country B.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Prince Abraham, Vice President and Global Head of Rewards Development and Mobility at Novo Nordisk. During the episode, Prince shares Novo Nordisk's global talent mobility journey from traditional relocation of talent to more holistic talent mobilization where both talent and jobs are mobile. Prince also shares why moving jobs to where talent is based is a key enabler for achieving future business and talent objectives. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Prince, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are now.
I sort of divide my whole career into maybe four buckets of experiences, right? I started my career in organization development. That's where sort of I started right after my college. In a company called Infosys, a huge company in back in India, ITS organization. Started my career there focusing on performance management, career frameworks, and sort of broadly org designing. And then moved on to my second bucket, which is primarily business partnering. That's sort of something that I've done then in the mid part of my career, where I was HR partnering, starting in Infosys, and then later on joining Novo Nordisk as a HR partner. Few years into Novo Nordisk, there was an opportunity to jump into rewards, total rewards, and that came as an opportunity due to somebody leaving and my boss asking me, would you want to learn and pick up something at the same time along with your existing HR partner role. So it was sort of a hybrid role that got created for me. And so I then sort of moved into rewards and I have then stayed with rewards for over last 9 years now, doing multiple roles. Started in India, moved to Dubai, managed Africa, Europe later on, and sort of have grown into roles where I've managed mostly all parts of the world in some capacity, either as a partner or later on as a leader, managing different rewards partners across the organization. And then, of course, my last bucket is what I call as a mix hybrid again, where today I'm heading up two roles. One of them is rewards development. So that's primarily focusing on global rewards processes, benefits, insights, technology, experience.
I know something you're really passionate about and working on now is looking at how you're digitizing the employee experience.
Overall employee experience, as we have seen, at least in Novo, is sort of at the center of what and how we do things, specifically in rewards and mobility as well, right? And what I mean by that is that, if you look at it from a P&O process point of view, when you come to rewards or seen from a mobility point of view, these processes can't work in isolation. They're quite entangled with whether it's talent acquisition process or whether it's a talent management process, which has an outcome that needs to then have an impact on a process in the mobility processes as well. So there's no process within rewards and mobility that can stand in isolation. And what that simply means is that if you run processes in silo, experience is going to be quite broken, seen from a manager's point of view, seen from HR partner's point of view, and of course, in the end, seen from an employee point of view, whichever sort of experience they sort of see on a day-to-day basis. Over the last few years, we have had focus on ensuring that we digitalize as many processes, standardize them, build them in a context of experience that's globally focused, but also locally relevant in a way that makes sense for everyone. And is not seen as a silo process, but more an end-to-end experience, right? And we've been trying on many things. For a few years back, we tried a job leveling tool that was designed using artificial intelligence, where you could type the title and the AI would do the job in the back end, give you a job description and sort of a leveling around it, right? So there's many things that we've been trying in the past around it. Same with, let's say, insights, where we have now democratized it, as I call it, towards leaders to be able to take day-to-day rewards decisions, right? Whether that's in the context of building sustainable teams, which is around fairness, transparency, and equity, but also now taking that to next step to see how do we become fair and transparent as an organization when it comes to employees. So how do we ensure that employees are able to have access to certain information where they are able to experience, these three principles that I just mentioned, which is fairness and transparent and equitable processes, right? So I think within rewards, we have a lot of global processes now over the last 3-4 years where we have been working to ensure that that experience is at the center of it.
When you say employee experience has to be at the center of it, what does that mean?
In my view, it essentially means how you integrate different processes across different COEs or different functions within P&O, right? So how do you ensure that you come from a recruitment process into an offer process, go out into a very operational contract process, and then go into a very second element of operational aspect of onboarding and so on and so on and so on. How do you digitally enable it in a way that it is not sort of broken, but connected from one flow to the other flow in a seamless way, right? That is, of course, the journey we are on. I would not say that we have reached it. As you can hear, it is quite complex to build that because, of course, traditionally we have all built in each of our functions, systems that make sense for us as a function.
Yes.
But when you look at it from an employee's point of view, we need to ensure sort of we come together and see what makes sense and how do we streamline this experience from end to end, seen from an employee point of view rather than from an HR point of view, because traditional systems are built from an HR point of view and not necessarily from an employee point of view. From a mobility point of view, one of the good examples of that is how we have evolved our processes around virtual work options, as we call it, right? Which is nothing but, instead of moving in a traditional mobility, you move the talent from country A to country B. In virtual work options, we don't move the talent because the talent doesn't want to move and has other priorities from a maybe personal front or whatever it is, right? And rather we enable the work to move from country A to country B. And of course, it's a bit more different in the pharma industry because it's much more regulated around the risks that we have around permanent establishment, around patents, and so on. But this is something that we have been working over the last 2.5 years to see how do we evolve that process and from an experience point of view to ensure that the end customer, that's the employee, manager, HR partners, are able to see a seamless experience rather than sort of a very broken experience from an employee point of view.
What's the outcome been of that? How long have you had that in place?
2.5 years back is when we started it. And of course, a lot of it was because of COVID, because COVID came and in many ways disrupted the way we work in many fronts, right? And this was one of the things that, people who had gone back home, they were not able to travel, and some of them who thought that they couldn't have dual career suddenly said, okay, why can't I just continue working from where I'm working because my partner is able to continue to work and so on, so forth. And what we started was with what we called as the first level of virtual work policies, where we enabled that for business reasons to start with, to say, okay, if you have certain reasons and there is a business need, and if that sort of combines together the personal need and the business need, then we will try to make that happen across all the locations. One of the things we very quickly learned was that, when you have this virtual work options, a lot of these employees who don't have their managers sitting with them, their teams sitting with them, started losing that sense of belongingness, started sort of, see themselves as, where do I belong? Because I don't belong to the local unit where I'm actually sitting, but my manager is not here. So we started sort of looking into how do we then ensure that we take it to a next level where belongingness, the cultural element that the employee has to sort of, be around is not lost. And that's sort of when we evolved our policy into what we call as now the virtual hub strategy, which enables employees to work out of virtual hubs in 21 sites. It's not 21 countries because one country could have multiple sites depending on sort of how big the country is. But we have 21 sites across the globe where we've had talent in the past, seen from a, easiness of hiring, seen, of course, from a talent marketplace point of view, where do we hire from where are we losing people in the market. We build that hub strategy where we sort of have created a role, what we call as hub owner, who then is accountable for local ownership, ensuring that there is a belongingness built towards the employees who are maybe not locally reporting, but
Yeah.
still part of the broader Novo Nordisk family. So that has sort of where we have landed now, where the intention is that, of course, 21 sites would continue to be our key focus. So that's where we have around 80 to 75% of our talent. But of course, we don't say that you cannot do it outside, but there's a governance that we then follow to ensure that that belongingness is equally focused on, and not sort of left as a last thing to focus on.
Have you seen a decrease in attrition since moving to this strategy, both in terms of moving where work is done as opposed to people, and also having those hubs?
Attrition has not been a big concern, broadly speaking, in Novo Nordisk. As an organization, we have sort of stayed at the same percentage for many years. So I would not maybe sort of say there's a direct impact there, but where we see the impact is in being able to get talent quite faster,
Okay,
and
yeah, the
some of the
opposite. Yeah.
niche skills that we are able to get, right?
When you speak about before about rather than having the employee move to where the work is, the work moves to the employee. Who makes that decision, whether that happens?
It is, of course, the starting point is the line manager who needs to decide where the talent is, and if that talent is not able to move, and due to whatever is the reason, and if it is a talent that is a niche skill that we would not want to lose out on, right? So of
Mm-hmm.
course the starting point is always with the manager who needs to take the call as part of the talent acquisition process, right? And then the talent acquisition process, the talent acquisition partners reach out to us in our team, who then sort of ensures that we do some risk assessments, because like I said, we are in a very regulated, highly regulated industry within pharma. So we do some assessments along with our corporate tax team, to sort of assess what are the risks of this particular role sitting and working out of where the reporting line is.
Yeah.
And then of course, if there are sort of, we've created certain levels of risk, depending on that it goes to different
Okay.
categories, right? So if it is certain high risk, then it goes to the business unit heads. If not, we try to see if it is possible that we get some approvals from the hub owners, and so on. But essentially, the hub owner is the place where that person has to accept, because again, it's not just that you give a seat and a laptop for
Sure.
the person to work. You need to enable the employee to have that belongingness towards the local organization and ensure that you invest in it as a hub owner. So that's of course the key approval process.
Sure. Is there a certain amount of days that they have to visit the hub per month? Or is it like 2 days a week, or what's the process?
That's sort of left up to each hub. So what we follow is a very market fit approach, very similar to what we do in our business side. We don't try to put one hat fit all
Yeah,
sort
sure.
of a scenario on everyone. What we say is what works best for the hub, right? There are hubs where there is already policies that enable employees to work out of home, and in different cities. If you are, let's say, in Spain, you could work out of any city, and so on. But if you're in India, you have a policy that you need to be in office 2 times a week, so then you follow that policy. So it's
Okay.
essentially built in a way that you fit into the local reality to
Which makes
ensure that
sense.
again the belongingness is there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. That makes sense. Many companies, I feel, I've made that mistake of doing a one size fits all approach, not thinking about the context. With such a huge portion of your workforce going hybrid, how are you and the team helping support your managers? It's already a tough job, but then when you have people in different locations and different time zones, different hours.
From my team point of view, we have also evolved our structure to sort of fit into the new reality, right? One of the things that we did in our function is to create what we call as a mobility partner role. Mobility historically has been a very operational role. You sort of come at the last point once all the decisions are made, then you're told, okay, now you go in and
Yeah,
move the person, or
yeah,
move the work from one country to another, and whatever it is, right? So what we've done is we've tried to sort of move that conversation much ahead of the curve and created a set of partners that are regionally focused. So we have three broad teams, one focusing on Americas, that's based out of US, reporting to me. One we have focusing on EMEA, based out of Zurich / Denmark, and then one focusing on what we call as headquarter functions, because that's quite large, based out of Denmark. So I think business proximity is one of the things that we have tried to build into that model, so that when a manager comes to our shop, we don't sort of say, okay, this is traditional, this is virtual, you choose what you like, but sort of partner with the manager to advise them on what is the situation at hand and what are the policies that fit into it, into that reality, into that need, into that individual sometimes, because we have sort of tried to move away from this one had fit all approach, and sort of being as a function that sort of just tells this is the policy, go do it, right. And moving more towards an organization where we are a more business consulting firm. We are a unit or a team of people that are focused on advising, consulting, looking at sort of the situation and deciding which policy fits best, right. And for me, I think one of the things that I will see that evolving for us next as a next step would be that we would need to then look at hybrid models of policy. So some you will probably start with moving the person to the country for a few months, and the person learns, builds that cultural belongingness, whatever, send them back for a few years, they learn, and maybe again do some bit of hybrid. So there's going to be many of those things that we will evolve into over a period of time, which is again built not as a one hat fit all, but more sort of how do we ensure that we are looking at it from not just from an individual point of view, but also from a point of view of the huge focus that we have on sustainability, whether that's from reducing the travel to ensuring that we don't sort of fit one policy to a traditional policy of a family of two, husband, wife, and kids, to somebody who doesn't come from a traditional family setup.
Yeah, it also allows you as a business, right, to be a lot more agile. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, and that is one key thing when you grow. And of course, the latest numbers of Novo Nordisk, if you grow at that pace with which we are growing, you need to be agile. You need to be able to adapt, be agile, and see what sort of fits the best, right? Of course, you need to have certain basic things in place, which is the broad infrastructure, broad policies, and stuff like that. But you also need to be able to evolve, because we are working not just growing in the same segment that we've grown forever, but also going into new therapy areas, which means new skills, very niche skills time to time, that's not necessarily something that we've been hiring in the past. So I think that's where it becomes extremely important that you are able to be agile and move away from being operational to being more advising, consulting.
I love that.
Move away from just sitting centrally in headquarters as a function to being more business proximity. So move people out there into the business to say, okay, where is our business need, and you would sort of then partner with them on the ground, so that we are able to build that business proximity.
Yeah, I love it's kind of similar to the HR business partner model, right? But you have the mobility partner model. I know
I have very proudly stolen it from the HR partner model. I don't think so.
No, I think
I've invented in any way.
Yeah, I spoke to multiple companies like Unilever and others who have a similar role. They all have different names for these roles, but essentially it's acting in the same way that you described. We're going to see that continue to evolve. What from a talent perspective? Do you have like an internal talent marketplace? How are you thinking about how you look at what skills exist in the business and how talent moves throughout the business?
It is a huge focus, ensuring that if you look at the way we are structured as an organization, it is structured around the pharma value system, right? So we have, early research and development all the way to sales and marketing, and those are sort of the pillars. And of course, one of the key focus is how do we ensure that we move talent across these different value chain aspects, right? To ensure that they are able to get that experience, but also when they go back, they are able to connect those two things together, right? And that is a huge focus, right? To be very honest, I don't think so from a mobility point of view, we have been able to crack that yet completely. One of the things we are discussing is how do you ensure that your talent outcome is tied quite closely to what the mobility decisions are, at least, right, from a manager's point of view. So, for example, if I have three talents who I think are going to be taking up some very critical roles in the future, what talent mobility is needed for them to be able to get ready for that role? And that's the connect that we are sort of trying to build. And one of the things we have done, not yet gone live with yet, but we are working towards is that we are building sort of a talent intent from a point of view of managers' needs into our system when managers come to our shop, right? So the way it would work is that when manager comes to our shop to say, okay, I have this need, there would be sort of a questionnaire using AI where we would work with managers to say, okay, are these elements of talent outcomes that you are expecting? And then direct managers towards the policy that fits them the best rather than trying to sort of fit what managers would be already aware of as a policy, right?
Of
Which may be
course.
that the manager knows maybe only 20% of the policy because they've never done or never moved somebody, as an example.
Yeah, ideally, they don't need to come to you whatsoever, right? They can just ask the system.
The way we are working with to enable AI in a way that the managers go and put some keywords, and that's going to be around talent intent. What is your intent to move this person?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this coming from? What do you want to achieve? The tool will sort of generate a mobility assignment for you that makes more sense for that need, basically. So that's the thing
Interesting.
that we are working with right now. We built it ourselves from scratch, so it's a tool that we have built internally. Now we are in a place where we are doing some testing. Looks good, at least the initial test, but of course mobility is a very complex process, and like I said, what we are trying to do now is to connect it to different existing policies and processes and systems, basically, right? So for
Sure.
example, a manager should not be going into a system and thinking I want this, but as soon as the recruitment process is over, should just be automatically going from there to the next
It should
step, right? If there is
trigger.
a mobility element, it should be triggers, it
Yeah.
should be
Nudging the managers as well, right? As we look towards sort of the next couple of years ahead of you, what are you most excited about in terms of what you and the team are working on?
excited to see how this virtual work options evolve. I can see many countries are now started going into that space, with Spain coming up with visa specifically for working out of Spain, and not necessarily being in
Yeah.
Spain, and
Yeah,
so on,
yeah.
right? The UAE as well, just recently Dubai has come up with the visa for that, where you can work out of Dubai but not be in Dubai, as an example, right? So I think there are many countries who are looking into this element. So it would be interesting to see how that sort of evolves and becomes part of the much broader framework.
Firstly, it feels like we need to do a part two to see how this journey evolves as well, because it's going to be super interesting as how this evolves over the next few years, right? So I'd love to do that. But what, having started the journey and being on it, there's obviously challenges along the way, right? What advice would you give to our listeners that are going to be on a similar talent mobility journey? And then we'll say goodbye.
For me, one of the things that I have learned and changed also from my point of view in this journey is how you take along people with you, right? And when I say people, it's not necessarily just mobility team or your own team or your own function, right? I think if we have to enable that end-to-end experience, you really need to work across different stakeholders, right? Whether that's in talent acquisition, whether that's in HR partners. So what we did is what we call as co-creating this with our many different stakeholders, right? And that really helps because that helps in two ways. One is that it helps different stakeholders to understand where you are coming from, what you are trying to do, but it also enables them to understand their role into it, because you cannot as a function just work on this alone because of the nuances it has in it when it comes to mobility as a function, right? One of my advice would be to, if you want to go further, take your key stakeholders along with you, and that would help you not just in being successful, but also ensuring that you are building that understanding across different layers of the organization, and across different parts of the organization. So that would be one. And the second would be open, be curious, and be ready to change and adapt, because we had this policy started in 2021. We've rewritten this policy probably 6 times already, not because we didn't know many things. One, of course, is that, but it is also that the need of the business has evolved. We
Evolved,
have
yeah.
also sort of been very open to say, okay, now if this is what business needs, how do you then evolve that policy into a place that makes sense for the business, rather than sort of sitting with a policy that doesn't add up, right?
Amazing. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end it, Prince. I appreciate you taking the time to join us, and congrats to you and the team, all the great work that you've done so far. I know you've got a lot ahead of you, but it's always about celebrating the wins along the way. And I wish you all the best until we next speak, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks.
Pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.